It's not too You'll get over that.
May I? Absolutely. I should have brought. Be patient with.
In the meantime, I'll ask the clerk to please call the roll.
Here. Senator McCann. Senator Cherry. Here. Senator Bear. Here. Senator Santana. Present. Senator Schenck. Senator Irwin. Senator Hertel. Here. Senator Kavanaugh. Here. Senator Kleinfeld. Here. Senator McMorrow. Here. Senator Camilleri. Here. Senator DeMoose. Here. Senator Heisinger. Senator Altman. Here. Senator Tice. Here. And Senator Irwin. Here. And Senator Schenck. Here. Madam Chair, you have 18 members present. You have a quorum.
Thank you. I now move to excuse absent members from today's meeting. That is supported by Vice Chair McCann. Without objection, absent members will be excused from today's meeting. I'd like to welcome you all and especially welcome the new chair of the House Appropriations Committee, Chair Bolin. As folks know, we came in together a few years ago back when we were serving in the House, and I'm so excited to be co-chairing the meeting with you this morning. So I will turn it over to you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Anthony. It's good to be here and good to be back together. The House Committee on Appropriations will come to order. The clerk has distributed a letter from the Speaker appointing members to the House Committee on Appropriations. Each member has a copy of that letter at their desk. And clerk will include it in the record. Will the clerk please take the roll?
Chair Bolin.
Here.
Representatives Maddock.
Here.
Green.
Present.
Jenkins Arno. Kelly.
Here.
Markkinen.
Here.
Mueller.
Here.
Slaw.
Present.
Van Workum. Beeson.
Here.
Borton.
Here.
Roth.
Here.
Cavett.
Here.
DeSena.
Here.
Kuhn. Steele. Robinson. Farhat.
Here.
O'Neill. Rogers. Steckloff. Glanville. Edwards. Martis. McKinney.
Here.
Morgan.
Here.
Price. Snyder. Long John. Madam Chair, you have 27 members present. You do have a quorum.
Thank you. I move to excuse absent members from today's meeting. Without objection, the absent members will be excused from today's meeting.
All right. Thank you again, Chair Bolin. We'd like to turn it over to the State Budget Office. So we have State Budget Director Jen Flood as well as Deputy State Budget Director Kyle Garant to present the Governor's 2025-2026 budget recommendations. So thank you, and we will turn it over to you.
Thank you and good morning, Chair Anthony, Chair Bolin, and members of the committee. Thank you for welcoming me this morning to present the governor's budget for fiscal year 26. This budget will lower costs, create jobs, improve student outcomes, and support our seniors. First, I'd like to take a quick moment to focus on Michigan's success story. Thanks to our work together and the governor's leadership, Michigan's economy is strong. We've built up record reserves in our rainy day funds. Through fiscal year 26, we'll have paid off more than $25 billion in debt since the governor took office. Our credit rating has been upgraded and revenues are up. Today marks the beginning of the budget process for fiscal year 26, and I look forward to working with each and every one of you in the weeks and months ahead to finalize a budget by July 1st that will benefit every Michigander. I'm excited to lay out the governor's budget, which focuses on kitchen table issues that matter most to all Michiganders. And while inflation is cooling, families are still struggling with rising costs, and that's why the #1 focus of this budget is lowering costs. Additionally, the budget we're presenting today focuses on improving student outcomes, delivers a balanced budget, Governor Whitmer's 7th, continues making fiscally responsible investments by ensuring one-time resources are used for one-time purposes, makes government more efficient, and grows the rainy day fund to another all-time high. Being the state budget, it's easy to get caught up in numbers and spreadsheets. But to me, the budget is about people. When I approach this important work, I think about what these investments will mean to residents across the state. Let's talk about kids. This year's budget proposes another all-time high record investment in our students, $10,000 per pupil, and that's an extra $392 per student. Every Michigan student deserves the resources they need to get a good paying job and set themselves up for a brighter future. And every Michigan family deserves to raise their kids in communities with world-class schools. That's why we must build on the progress we've made and get smart on education. In addition to the historic per pupil funding, this budget also continues free school meals because kids learn best when their bellies are full. It offers free, high-quality pre-K to every 4-year-old across the state. It invests in evidence-based approaches to reading and learning and provides $150 million ongoing for student mental health and safety. As a mom of 2, I can talk about how rewarding parenting is, and I can also speak firsthand to the cost of raising children. That's why this budget is focused on lowering costs for families. We're proposing universal pre-K, which saves families $10,000 per child in saved daycare costs. Free school meals, which saves parents time and puts an extra $850 in their pockets every single year. And then based on the good work we've been able to do together to establish the Reconnect program and the Achievement Scholarship, every high school graduate has the ability to earn a certificate or associate's degree tuition free and save up to $27,000 towards the cost of a 4-year degree. Added up over the course of a child's education, that's $50,000 per child, and that's a big deal. This budget also continues the Working Families Tax Credit, which puts more than $3,500 back into the pockets of 650,000 families across our state. Additionally, with this budget, we're going to continue to focus on fixing our roads and bridges, building more affordable housing, sending more resources to communities across the state to support the hiring of police, fire, fixing local roads, and improving quality of life. And next, I want to talk about seniors. With this budget, we'll fully phase in the retirement tax rollback. That's $1,000 per household. We're also funding support services for Michiganders with dementia, providing more resources to support seniors to age in place, expanding the PACE program, and also allowing them to access Medicaid without spending down their resources. As the daughter of a small business owner, I know that no one works harder than the entrepreneurs across our state. Small businesses are the backbone of our economy. That's why this budget includes funding to offer job training grants to employers, expand access to apprenticeships, and invest in rural communities throughout our state through the Office of Rural Prosperity. This is a budget that invests in small businesses so they can successfully grow in their business and in turn our economy. This budget also supports our heroes on the front lines. It includes $75 million for a public safety trust fund to support law enforcement and community violence intervention across the state, $26 million to invest in infrastructure and support our $30 billion defense industry in Michigan, which supports more than 100,000 jobs. This budget also helps first responders battling cancer, provides childcare to National Guard members on drilling status, and funds mental health supports for our first responders. As you can see on this chart, the budget recommended today totals $83.5 billion. Of that, 18% is the general fund, meaning a vast majority of the state's budget comes from resources dedicated to specific purposes. Of our total budget, 42% comes from the federal government, and I'd like to turn it over to Deputy Budget Director Kyle Grunt to talk a little more about that topic.
As committee members are aware, over the past week there has been uncertain news from the federal government about states' ability to access federal funds that have been appropriated by Congress. Federal funding is critical to protecting the health and safety of all Michiganders, ensuring drinking water is clean and food is safe, keeping people in their homes, and funding homeland security and emergency management. Federal funds make up just shy of 42% of the fiscal year 26 executive budget recommendation. This equates to nearly $34.8 billion. In fiscal year 25, federal funding totaled $33.9 billion in both the general and education omnibus acts. For comparison, the current total of the Budget Stabilization Fund and the Rainy Day Fund in the school aid is $2.8 billion. A U.S. District Court judge issued a temporary restraining order on January 31st that allowed states that were party to the lawsuit, like Michigan, to continue accessing federal funds while the legal process plays out. I'll turn it back over to Director Flood.
Zeroing in on the general fund, nearly 80% of these resources support vital services and programs that Michiganders rely on, like healthcare, the protection of vulnerable children and adults, public safety, and higher education. As we continue adjusting to a new pandemic normal following the unprecedented federal resources that flowed into our state, you can see that here, adjusted for inflation, general fund spending has remained relatively flat. This budget recommendation is built with an eye toward the future and is structurally balanced, meaning we put one-time resources into one-time investments. This approach ensures that future fiscal years are balanced. This budget builds on our track record of 7 balanced bipartisan budgets passed on time. We're proposing deposits into the rainy day fund and the school rainy day fund, bringing the collective balance to nearly $3 billion, and that's more than doubled since the governor took office. During this time, I know Michigan is well positioned, and we don't always brag about that. Other states are not in the same position. My colleagues across the country, both Democrat and Republican, are facing really tough decisions. Lawmakers in other states are dipping into their rainy day funds. They're raising taxes to fill deficits and backfill unsustainable spending. Schools are facing layoffs and cuts. Here in Michigan, as you all know, we're in a much better place, and I want to thank members of this community for supporting our efforts on fiscal responsibility. I also want to brag about some really hardworking folks in state government that don't always get to share the spotlight. We have an alumni here, Senator Albert. The State Investment Board and the Michigan Retirement System are tasked with ensuring long-term financial security for state employees. They manage the assets of the retirement funds for state employees, teachers, and public workers, and they do a really good job. Thanks to their work, Michigan consistently outperforms its peers on returns on investment, and that overperformance means $2 billion additional in resources in the fiscal year 26 budget alone. So shout out to that team for all of the incredible work that they do behind the scenes. Also in this slide, you can see our debt paid down by fiscal year going back to 2010. And as I mentioned, through the end of fiscal year 26, we will have paid down more than $25 billion in debt. This budget is focused on making a difference in real people's lives. So let's work together to improve student outcomes, grow our economy, lower costs, and support our seniors. I look forward to working with each of you in the months ahead to make Michigan a great place for all residents, and I will turn it over to our Deputy Budget Director, Kyle Grunt, to walk through some slides.
Thank you, Dr. Flood, and thank you, chairs and committee members, for the opportunity to share more detail on the fiscal year 26 executive recommendation. I know there's a lot of slides in your packet, and I'm going to do my best to move through them efficiently to give a little more context and detail, knowing that we have a months-long process to continue the dialogue and conversation together. The governor has continuously focused on improving student academic achievement by providing additional financial resources and supports for those with greater needs. This has included implementing weighted funding models, increasing support for special education, expanding the educator workforce, improving access to mental and physical health services, and providing targeted dollars for academic interventions. This budget builds upon these prior investments and pushes districts to work to improve student outcomes through targeted expenditures and improved parental engagement. This budget includes $516 million to support school operations through a 4.1% increase in the per pupil foundation allowance. This increase will guarantee districts receive at least $10,000 per pupil. This level of per pupil funding represents a 27% increase since the governor's first budget. Nearly $10.4 billion is appropriated to support K-12 operations through the foundation allowance. This budget also provides a corresponding 4.1% increase to the existing weighted funding model. You may already know that February is Career and Technical Education Month. My middle daughter, Maddox, is currently a few blocks away at Sparrow Hospital getting hands-on training to begin her journey to become a nurse, thanks to CT programs offered by the Ingham Intermediate School District. So I'm excited to share this budget provides $145 million to support career pathways for students. $125 million is established to provide new and expanded career and technical education programs in areas of the state that lack access, and an additional $20 million is proposed to continue to support the purchase of new equipment for CTE programs. This budget proposal also includes new requirements for districts that focus on students, metrics, and results with transparency, or SMART, to improve student outcomes. The fiscal year 26 budget builds upon prior investment and pushes districts to continue work to improve student outcomes through targeted expenditures and improved parental engagement. Key SMART highlights include that the budget provides $232 million for best practice incentives. Districts with buildings identified for improvement in the Michigan School Index System would be guaranteed funding, and districts with buildings up to 50% of the 50 percentile of the school index score would be eligible for funding on a sliding matching scale. Dollars can be used on a predefined list of best practices and high-impact tutoring that was originally implemented and included in the My Strategy Bank as part of the My Kids Back on Track program. It also doubles the investment in literacy grants from the current fiscal year level, the current fiscal 25 level of $19.9 million to $39.8 million for additional literacy instruction time. The fiscal year 26 budget revises the funding distribution model based on the number of students scoring less than proficient on state literacy assessments. This change is intended to better target available resources to schools with students with the most need. For districts with buildings identified in the Michigan School Index System, the budget also requires that 10% of combined at-risk funding and discretionary foundation allowance funding generated by students in those buildings to be utilized on best practices, and high-impact tutoring to improve outcomes for students. Student success is often dependent upon high levels of engagement from parents and guardians. This budget recognizes this, including new requirements for districts to inform parents and guardians about the academic standing of their child's building, the availability of targeted student interventions, and how the district is utilizing dollars to support academically at-risk students. In the higher ed space, this budget recommendation proposes a 4% ongoing increase for university and community college operations to enhance higher education learning and support Michigan's goal of 60% of working adults earning a degree or skills certificate by 2030. Additional investments in the College Success Fund will empower public and private institutions to improve student support and boost completion rates. This budget recommendation also focuses on investing in workers and creating jobs in Michigan to improve wages, increase job security, and strengthen local economies. These investments are designed to foster job growth, improve workforce readiness, and create a more prosperous future that helps to make Michigan a great place to grow and raise a family. The budget includes a $26 million investment for critical infrastructure investments at the Selfridge Air National Guard Base to attract new missions and fighter aircraft, create jobs, and support the economy's growing defense industry. $50 million is proposed for child care contracts and prospective payments to provide increased opportunities to access quality child care services for infants and toddlers, children with disabilities, and children living in areas where child care options are scarce, while also beginning to meet new federal requirements. To increase permitting efficiency, save taxpayer dollars and support economic development, the FY26 executive recommendation proposes a $39 million investment to digitize and index Eagles records. These records are directly tied to permitting processes that enable businesses to move forward with projects such as construction, manufacturing, renewable energy development, and infrastructure upgrades. The The budget also provides for $54.8 million to continue to support the Going Pro program, which provides job training grants for businesses to upskill employees in high-demand, skilled trade industries. To date, Going Pro has resulted in an estimated 35,200 new hires and employees trained. Additionally, the budget proposal will expand registered apprenticeship programs, offering training, wages, and credentials to help Michiganders enter well-paying careers. This budget provides $25 million for employer-assisted housing, which will leverage investments from employers to support a range of housing projects that include housing acquisition, rental housing, down payment assistance, and rehabilitation targeting households earning under 120% of the area median income. The budget also provides $10 million for talent action teams to continue providing tailored talent solutions to businesses in strategic industries. This program helps businesses meet their talent needs by leveraging and building partnerships with educational institutions, connecting businesses to other state programs and resources, and implementing targeted talent marketing efforts to attract and retain top talent. $100 million is proposed to continue the business attraction and community revitalization program. These projects provide incentive grants and loans and other economic assistance to businesses moving to or expanding in the state, as well as for community revitalization investments that will redevelop functionally obsolete properties. In fiscal year 23, 67 business development projects and 35 community revitalization projects were approved by the Michigan Strategic Fund. $19 million is proposed to expand access to registered apprenticeships to strengthen Michigan's talent pool and ensure students and job seekers gain in-demand skills while also providing employers with the talent they need to grow their businesses. The funding will expand opportunities in traditional and non-traditional industries while offering training, wages, and credentials to employees. This budget provides a $50 million increase deposit into the post-secondary scholarship fund, raising the total ongoing investment to $350 million. This fund bolsters the Michigan Achievement Scholarships annual appropriation from the state's flagship financial aid program to help ensure it is sufficient to fund the program at full implementation. The governor's recommended budget reinforces a strong commitment to long-term investments in student financial aid and reducing barriers to post-secondary attainment. Through the Community College Guarantee, the Michigan Achievement Scholarship provides full-time community college students with free in-district tuition and an additional $1,000 for Pell Grant recipients to cover living expenses. For eligible students attending public or private four-year institutions, these scholarships offer up to $5,500 annually towards the cost of attendance. More than 56,000 scholarships were awarded in the 2024 fall semester, and we anticipate 100,000 students will benefit every year once this program is fully implemented. Opportunities for families, students, and workforce are abundant in Michigan. Still, not everyone starts off on equal footing or has the same opportunities that they need to thrive and get ahead. This budget recommends supporting children who are at risk for removal from their homes by helping place them with family or allowing them to remain in their homes. The recommendation includes investments to improve the safety, placement, and permanency of children in foster care throughout their childhood. The recommendation also provides additional resources to help ensure that young adults exiting the system retain their federal financial benefits, such as Social Security, to help them successfully transition into adulthood and more independent living arrangements. Economic stability is crucial for these youth to improve access to essential needs like housing, education, transportation, food, and healthcare. A 2024 national survey by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention and FDA finds that tobacco and nicotine product use was reported by 10.1% of high school students and 5.4% of middle school students. 14% of Michigan's high school students use e-cigarettes, according to the CDC. Among all students, e-cigarettes were the most commonly reported tobacco product currently used, followed by nicotine pouches. To address this ongoing public health concern, and close a loophole, the budget proposes taxing vaping and non-tobacco nicotine products similar to tobacco products, with all revenues supporting smoking and cancer prevention, youth mental health and physical health, and access to health care. 32 states now tax vaping products, including all of our Great Lakes neighboring states of Indiana, Illinois, Ohio, Wisconsin, and Minnesota. The executive budget recognizes the importance of healthcare accessibility, especially for our most vulnerable residents and neighbors. To that end, this budget invests $96.4 million to expand Medicaid eligibility. Currently, Medicaid requires elderly and disabled enrollees with income above 100% of the federal poverty limits to spend the majority of their income on healthcare costs each month until their remaining income is less than 40% of the federal poverty limits before they can access Medicaid. This proposal would shift this level to 100% of the federal poverty limits, broadening access to Medicaid supports and preventing excessive spend down of personal income to help keep more seniors in their homes and prevent individuals from spending down into poverty in order to access health care. This budget also directs $46.8 million in opioid settlement funds to programs to reduce opioid deaths through prevention and treatment while investing in recovery supports. The executive budget devotes a significant amount of resources to elderly individuals in Michigan. It increases support for dementia services, expands available slots in the program of all-inclusive care for the elderly or PACE program, and bolsters indirect supports in nursing homes. The budget also provides additional investment to assure timely issuances of new licenses and renewal of existing licenses, routine inspections and complaint investigations at Michigan's 342 retirement homes and assisted living facilities. The executive recommendation provides an additional $5 million for the Michigan Achieving a Better Life Experience, or MyAble program, which allows disabled individuals to save money on certain expenses without impacting their eligibility for other benefits. This investment will help promote and educate Michiganders on the availability of the program and support operations during an impending federal expansion that will make 500,000 additional Michigan residents eligible to partake in this program. The budget also proposes a $40 million investment for the community reentry of incarcerated individuals to provide Medicaid coverage starting 90 days before an individual's scheduled release. This will allow for health screenings and other services prior to reentry to identify key health needs to facilitate a successful transition. Investing in these transition services will help improve health outcomes and access to community services, all of which will reduce recidivism. To ensure long-term public safety, the executive recommendation provides a range of evidence-based rehabilitative, vocational, and educational programs and other community supports aimed at increasing the personal success of offenders, supporting reentry into their communities as returning citizens, and reducing their risk of reoffense. Since Governor Whitmer took office in 2019, Michigan has invested more than $28 billion to fix Michigan's roads. This budget continues to invest in roads and secure all available federal highway aid funding, ensuring continued progress to the repair and maintenance of Michigan's roads and bridges. The recommendation also designates funds for a pilot program to explore road usage charge revenue options and proposes installing electric vehicle charging stations across the state to support continued transition to cleaner energy sources for automobiles. The executive recommendation continues to protect clean drinking water, proposing an $80 million investment for lead service line replacement and water infrastructure to support local communities with grants and low-interest loans for replacing lead service lines, installing storm water management systems, and upgrading the water infrastructure. This budget also invests $15 million for dam safety and management to support removal, maintenance, and engineering studies associated with the 200-plus dams currently under the state's jurisdiction, focused on the most critical dams that require removal and maintenance. Dam removals increase safety for communities nearby and downriver, restore river health, and enhance fish and wildlife habitats. This budget also invests in our state parks, funding maintenance improvements and expanding access to outdoor recreation, ensuring Michiganders can experience the natural wonders of Michigan's state park system while granting free access to veterans. The fiscal year 26 executive recommendations, public safety investments are designed to ensure the safety and well-being, the security and well-being of Michiganders by ensuring law enforcement capabilities, supporting victim services, and safeguarding critical sectors of the economy. $1 million is proposed. A $1 million increase is proposed to increase intelligence and expand capability within the Michigan Intelligence Operations Center to provide analytic and investigative support to all Michigan enforced law enforcement, including local, state, federal, and tribal agencies. A 4% ongoing increase in the general statutory revenue sharing is proposed compared to the fiscal year enacted 25 base salaries, a 4% ongoing increase. A $75 million increase for Public Safety Trust Fund in both fiscal years 26 and in a fiscal year 25 supplemental to support public safety initiatives and services in cities, villages, and townships is included in this recommendation. Funds will be distributed in proportion to violent crime data collected by the Michigan State Police. This budget also recommends including $5.5 million to protect our food supply by investing in practices that can identify and prevent disease outbreaks in livestock. The fiscal year 26 budget includes several investments aimed at making government work better for the people we serve, focused on improving the speed of permitting, regulatory decisions, and operations by expanding capacity to serve Michiganders across several key departments. Part of creating a better government is ensuring our departments and programs have the tools and technology to provide customer service and improving the public's ability to interact with government efficiently. This budget supports staff and transition funding to operate and relocate to the state's new psychiatric hospital, which will serve Michigan children and adults, increasing capacity by 54 beds for a total of 264 beds. This budget also deposits $50 million into the Budget Stabilization Fund, which would bring the rainy day fund balance to approximately $2.3 billion by the end of the fiscal year, an all-time high and a doubling since the governor took office. It also sets aside $50 million into the rainy day fund for schools, bringing that balance to a total of $550 million to shield school funding and, most importantly, our students from future economic uncertainty. Thank you to the chairs and committee members for the opportunity to present the executive recommendations. As I said earlier, this is a quick run through, a lot in there, and we appreciate the opportunity. On behalf of Director Flood and I, I'd like to thank our budget development team in the State Budget Office, some of whom are here today and watching online, for their hard work and expertise in putting this strong recommendation forward. With that, I will turn it back over to the chairs, and Director Flood and I will be happy to address any questions committee members may have.
Thank you. Are you all able to hear me okay? No? Okay. What about now? Yeah. All right. Look at God. Okay. All right. We do have a series of questions, and Chair Bolin and I will probably just take turns calling on House and Senate members. The Senate will begin. Senator McMorrow.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you both for being here today. Thank you for addressing the amount of federal funding that the state receives. I think we all were made painfully aware of what disruptions to federal funding look like over the past week with the federal freeze that impacted programs like Head Start and sent a lot of our residents, frankly, spiraling. Can you talk a little bit more about the impact to losing federal dollars should the federal government decide to move forward with something like eliminating the Department of Education or cutting back on federal funds, which really is, just for point of clarification, those are our tax dollars that go to the federal government and then come back into our state. Is that correct?
That's accurate. And as Kyle mentioned, federal funding is critical to keeping the health and safety of Michiganders at the forefront. 42% of our state budget is federal funds, and that funds critical programs like Head Start, like Meals on Wheels, making sure our food is safe to eat, our water is safe to drink, the lights are on, and people are in their homes. And so there's been obviously a lot of chaos out of Washington, D.C. over the past couple of weeks. We're monitoring closely the executive orders that are coming out and also actions in the courts to determine what it could mean for our state. But I know that there's critical programs we all care about that have been disrupted, and we'll continue to monitor it closely. The budget today that we're presenting is based on what's in current law, but should there be changes, we're going to have to work together on what the next steps look like.
Thank you. I'm going to start with a question from this side. Thank you very much for being here, Budget Director Flood and Deputy Director Garant. My question has to do with roads. We've heard this week that the governor is going to roll out a plan for roads next week, although it's been stated that it's been a priority, I think, for most of us here for, the last 6 going on 7 years. This is an $83.5 billion budget, larger than last year, yet I see no revenue for roads or strong investments in them. Can we expect some sort of an increase with the roads plan rollout?
Thank you for the question. We love talking about the roads. Since the governor took office, we've invested more than $28 billion in roads, bridges, and infrastructure across our state, and we look forward to continuing to partner with all of you to increase that investment. The budget we're presenting today includes about $100 million in general fund to make sure that we can draw down our federal match, and we look forward to continuing conversations about a long-term comprehensive road funding proposal. I know that it's a priority for the governor. I know it's a priority for Speaker Hall and Chair Boleyn, like you mentioned, so many other people here. We had really productive conversations late last year on what a comprehensive bipartisan plan could look like, and we look forward to continuing those in the weeks and months ahead.
Thank you.
Senator Bayer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you very much for being here today, both of you, for the presentation. We really appreciate the kickoff for our big work here that we're looking forward to. I have a comment and a question. So I know that all the data show that investing in early childhood is the biggest bang, right? The biggest return for our money is the more we can invest in early childhood. So the first comment I would make that we'll have to work on is the $50 million for early childhood, for child care, is really not a big enough drop in the bucket. So we could work on that. And the question I have is on the 4-year-old preschool, yay. Did we increase the number of slots for this year? Are we able to invite all our 4-year-olds in?
We're continuing to open the floodgates and say any 4-year-old who's ready and interested in entering high-quality, free, universal pre-K, we've got a spot for you. And we are proud of the expansion that's happened under this governor's leadership and our partnership with the legislature to open that up. We're doing aggressive outreach to make sure that families are aware of the program and know that they're eligible, and we look forward to continuing to fund that expansion until all 4-year-olds are enrolled.
Thank you.
Rep. Farhat.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and to the State Budget Director for being here today. Lately, the Mayor of Detroit, Mayor Duggan, has been talking about retaining young people and keeping young people in the state of Michigan. I know the governor focused a little bit on that last year with her Growing Michigan Together Council. How or what would you highlight in this budget, and what more can we do to emphasize keeping young people in the state of Michigan where they can obviously find a career, invest in the state? What could you highlight in this budget, and what could you say we could look forward to working on potentially?
Thank you, Representative Farhat, for that question and for your participation in the council last year. They came out with, as you know well, a robust list of recommendations, and I'm proud that we're making a lot of progress on that front. So just a few things that I'll highlight. When we think about keeping young people in the state, how do we make Michigan a great place to raise a family? And that's where our continued investments in lowering costs for families, record investment in our school, access to universal pre-K go a long way. as well as expansion of resources for young adults to earn a tuition-free certificate or an associate's degree, making higher education and a four-year degree more affordable. This budget does also include additional resources to continue our targeted efforts to grow the state's population, and we look forward to partnering with you all to build on that.
Senator Schenck.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for the work that went into this budget and for being here with us today. Last session, both houses passed a bicameral, bipartisan bill to provide access to the hybrid MSP pension for corrections officers, conservation officers, and the people who keep us safe here at the Capitol. And so I believe they are some of the hardest working state employees, although all state employees will fit in that category. But what I'm wondering is what provisions have been made for that hybrid pension system, and they're joining it in this year's budget.
Thank you for that question and for highlighting the really hard work of corrections officers across the state. I'm really proud of the investments that we've made to support corrections officers through changes in the department and collective bargaining, increased wages, and opportunities to retain talent there. We're obviously tracking closely what's happening with some of the bills. I'll defer to the legislature on the logistics of that, but our budget does take into consideration a reserve for any bills to come going forward that would have a fiscal impact that were passed by the 102nd legislature.
Representative Maddock.
Thank you. Thank you for making your proposal today. All this new spending sounds very nice. I have a kitchen table discussion question for you. Governor Whitmer gave one of her friends in Detroit, Faye Baydoun, about $20 million in taxpayers' money. And one of the first things she did is go out and spent about $4,500 on a coffee machine and $11,000 on a plane ticket. What is your plan to claw back that money to make things right?
I appreciate the question and to discuss opportunities to improve transparency here today. As you know, the governor's budget today and over the last several years has focused on statewide investments and proposals to benefit every Michigander. To the extent that there are interests in special grants, we welcome the opportunity to build on the transparency measures that we've built into the budget process over the past few years. We have embraced the congressional plan, what U.S. Congress and U.S. Senate put out, where sponsors of special grants are required to identify themselves ahead of time, to work through the subcommittee process, and to have their names out there well in advance of a budget being voted on. I know that the House has passed a resolution and has some rules along these lines, and I look forward to the opportunity to collaborate.
That sounds very nice. Do you plan on clawing back that money that she spent?
We look forward to working with the legislature on implementing additional transparency measures going forward.
That's a no answer. Thank you.
Senator Camilleri.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for the presentation. I want to go a little deeper on the potential cuts at the federal level and how that impacts public education. By our calculations, if the Department of Education were closed, that would account for 11% of the Michigan's overall school budget for our students, which is over $2.3 billion. So if President Trump and Elon Musk have their way, what would we do to make up that $2.3 billion in cuts? We're talking special education funding, school meals for all, Title I school funding for our most at-risk students, as well as protections in Title IX, which has been something that, enforcement of protecting women in sports. So what are we going to do in the event that they slash and cut all of that funding here at the state level?
I'll say at a high level, the news and potential cuts and orders have caused a lot of chaos. In state government, we're working with the cabinet and our legal counsel to understand what proposed cuts could mean. We don't have a crystal ball, and it's hard to know what could come to fruition for certain, but we've got to be ready for that and understand the potential impacts. I'll turn it to Kyle on education.
I'll just add that, as I mentioned earlier, our combined rainy day and budget stabilization fund is at $2.8 billion after the end of this fiscal year. So, the notion of us being able to backstop, whether it's education or some of the other, proposed cuts from the federal level is not really an option. Some difficult decisions would have to be made on what programs and services would need to be impacted should the federal government, cut resources to come to our state.
Representative McKinney.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Director and Deputy Director, for being here. Due to the redistricting lawsuit, my district has changed. It went from the 14th House District into the new 11th House District. The median income of my old House District was around $38,000–39,000. The median income in my new district has plummeted all the way down to $14,000. It is one of the most impoverished state house districts, if not the poorest house district in the entire state of Michigan. One of the things that, I would like to hear from you all in terms of what this budget addresses is how do we uplift some of that weight and pressure off of people's shoulders when it comes to the day-to-day costs of people living, right? Child care costs, to, groceries. I mean, me and my wife just went grocery shopping a couple of days ago, paying $9 just for a dozen eggs. That is absurd to me. And so, in particular, can you highlight what this budget does for utility costs, from water, home energy, heating costs? Because those are the costs I'm getting in my on my phone in my office every single day, and people need some reprieve. So what does this budget do to address some of those issues?
Thank you for that question. We know that rising costs are a concern for Michiganders across the state, and state government can't solve inflation, but we're here to partner with all of you on what we can do to make a real difference for people who need it most. The Working Families Tax Credit, which we all work together to expand Michigan's match from 6% up to 30% of the federal credit, puts more than $3,500 back in the pockets of working families, and that's a big deal. I highlighted some of our investments in pre-K through higher education, up to $50,000 per student over the course of their education. That's going to make a difference. I'm proud of the record investments we've made in childcare. And Senator Bayer, to your point, we're willing to work with anyone on surging additional resources there. I know that's an important pocketbook issue, and it's also important to our economy and how do we get more people in the workforce. We've heard advocacy from the business community on increasing access to childcare, so would love to continue working on that. And then you also mentioned utilities. In this budget, we do have resources for water affordability and energy assistance so that we can make sure the families who need help the most are able to keep the heat on and the lights on.
Senator Kleinfeld.
Thank you, Chair. My questions are very specific, and on the second one, I don't really necessarily expect for you to have an answer immediately. So then, rather than give a speech that isn't an answer, which we're all getting real good at, if you don't have an answer, just tell me you'll get back with me, as opposed to, talking about something else. I'm not trying to offend you. Everybody up here is guilty of that, so I'm not accusing you of anything. The first one is very specific. You have a proposal of new revenue for taxing vaping and non-tobacco nicotine products. Are there any other new revenue streams in the budget other than that proposal?
Deputy Director Grant highlighted the recreation passport opt-out,
yes.
which we've talked about, and this budget also includes an increase in the tipping fee to disincentivize out-of-state trash coming into our state.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so the second one is a road funding one. 2 years ago, I put $5 million in the budget for a road pilot study, and during negotiations, MDOT said, well, you don't need to have that in there because we're applying for a grant from the federal government. Last year, I put $5 million in to do a road study because, not road study, a pilot program, not, because we've studied everything and it was time to start doing something. And MDOT said, and we used general fund money to put it in boilerplate, and MDOT said, we don't need that in there because we're getting the grant no matter what. That road funding study is going to be done this year. And Rep. Puri, I don't see him here, would back me up on the discussion on this. Now I see in here a $7.8 million for a pilot program that we have twice attempted to put money in, and that was supposed to be happening this year no matter what. Do you know what happened in that situation?
Yes, and I'll start by saying that whenever we have an opportunity to protect taxpayer dollars here in the state, we'll take that. And so there was federal opportunity to do the project that you're talking about in terms of road usage study and pilot. And so we did suggest using the federal opportunity to fund that. Unfortunately, Michigan did not secure the grant, and so that's why you see this proposal for general fund in the budget. And if you'd like any more specific details, I'm happy to chat offline.
Okay. I think they thought they were going to get the grant. It's just we've now lost 2 years. And at least from our committee, there's been a big push on road funding. And then all of a sudden, this, right before the end of last year, everybody's talking about a road funding thing as if it's an emergency. And over in our committee, we're like, hey, we're trying to get this thing going for a couple of years. What's going on here? All of a sudden, everybody else is talking about it. I am disheartened to hear that that's not taking place this year, but thank you for the answer. I appreciate it.
Representative Green.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you both for being here. We've heard a lot of discussion today, and it seems a little bit of angst regarding federal funding and some of the changes there. Could you possibly pull the curtain back a little bit and give us an idea of maybe a 1-year, 5-year, 10-year plan on what we are planning on doing to curb our addiction to federal funding so that we're not in this situation consistently?
I'll highlight what Senator McMorrow mentioned, and those are Michigan taxpayer dollars that we're talking about that are going to Washington, D.C. I think it's in all of our best interest to make sure that they continue to flow back into our communities because they're funding things like Medicaid, Head Start, and Meals on Wheels. I know folks in this room heard from constituents last week with concerns about what that looked like. I can highlight on health care alone, more than 2.6 million Michiganders access health care through Medicaid or the Healthy Michigan program. Of the traditional Medicaid population, 75% of them are pregnant women and children. And so when we're talking about cuts of the magnitude that we're hearing about out from Washington, D.C., we're talking about people losing access to health care. That means higher bills to visit the doctor. That means our rural hospitals struggle and our economy does as well. And so I'm hopeful that we can partner together to mitigate the impacts of any federal policy changes.
Senator DeMoose.
Thank you. Director Flood, I know you're responsible for the entire state, but often people in a district like mine in northern Michigan feel somewhat overlooked. Can you discuss some of the things that you're doing that are important in some of the rural outlying areas of the state, like working with the Office of Rural Prosperity and these things?
I appreciate that question. I will just highlight potential Medicaid cuts and what that could mean for our rural hospitals who are dependent on that care and providing access to health care for rural residents across the state. In addition, the Office of Rural Prosperity has been a new initiative under Governor Whitmer, but it's had bipartisan legislative support. I know that we've worked with Senator McBroom on establishing that, and everywhere I go, people reach out and flag what a great success that has been. Republicans, Democrats, we're able to really drill down on how do we support rural economies across the state. A lot of the issues are the same, We're talking about childcare, infrastructure, access to broadband. But we're proud that this budget continues the funding for the Office of Rural Prosperity, gives them additional resources, and also partners with MDARD's Rural Development Fund to increase grants going to local communities across the state.
Representative Glanville.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you both for being here today. I wanted to return to the subject of education funding and look ahead a little bit to the deadline for the budget. As we all know, we have a statutory, it's in statute that we should have our budget finished on July 1st. Schools have already been reaching out to me concerned about not only the federal funding question marks, but then what might happen if we don't get our budget done. We've talked a lot, we've heard a lot today and recently about chaos and confusion, and even the suggestion that a budget may not be done on time. Sends all of our organizations into, a flurry of work. Teachers and others will be getting pink slips soon if there's not some understanding of that timeline. So can you speak a little bit more, again, about the implications, not just to our schools, but to our economy in general, if our budgets are not completed by July 1st?
Thank you for the question. Under the legislature in the governor's first term, there were bills passed to move the deadline to get the state's budget done up to July 1st. Those passed with unanimous bipartisan support. Under a Republican legislature and a Democratic legislature, we've been able to get the budget done by July 1st, which gives certainty to local governments and school districts across the state, as you mentioned. So I'm hopeful that we can continue that trend and make sure that local communities and school boards have what they need to plan to serve our communities and students into the next year.
Can you just speak a little bit to the implications, like I said, broader implications if there is not a budget?
I can. Many school districts and local communities have a fiscal year that begins on July 1st. And so part of the intention of that bill was to sync up our budgets. You could envision a scenario where schools or local communities have to do their best with the information they have at the time in June and pass their budgets, and then 3 months later, there's massive changes coming down from the state. And so to provide that certainty in terms of employment for locals and what programs can be supported, we think it's best to pass our budget on the same timeline so that there aren't scenarios where people are getting unexpected layoffs or cutting programs mid-year.
Thank you.
Any additional questions from Senate? Senator Bumstead.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for coming in today. I appreciate it. So if the budget was adopted as is, how much money would still be left on the balance sheet in the school aid fund and general fund?
This budget does leave some resources on the balance sheet, and I'm happy to follow up with those numbers. At the same time, it cuts taxes by more than $1 billion for residents across the state, pays down $3 billion in debt, and invests in critical programs that have bipartisan support, like expanding access to pre-K, funding school meals for children, and increasing access to higher education, apprenticeships, and CTE programs.
Thank you. Could I make one more question? And it's really not, it's more of a general question to the PROPS members on both sides of the aisle. There's only a couple members here that have been in this legislature since 2010. And Rick, I think it's Rick Outman and I, we're the old guys here. Oh, Sean McCann was there too. He's one of the old guys. You know, I want to remind everybody the budget back then, I think the first budget we dealt with was $47 billion. Now it's 80-some billion dollars. So I think it's time we need to look at budgets and see what's in there, what works, what doesn't work, and let's work together and figure that out, because it's costing taxpayers a lot of money to live in this state, and that's how we can help our residents is, looking into what works and what doesn't work and make it more affordable for them. So,
thank you for your comment, Senator.
Thank you, Representative Kelly.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for your presentation today. When I last served in the legislature 6 years ago as the chair of K-12 at Probst, the SAF has grown $6 billion, $1 billion a year, with student achievement, sharp degradation alongside that during that same period of time. Given the investments that you're asking, additional investments in the school aid fund, what level of confidence do you have that additional funds will turn around student achievement?
I greatly appreciate that question. We've seen nationwide student test scores that are suffering and are not at the levels that we would all like to see. And unfortunately, Michigan is a part of that trend, and we all need to do better. This budget both invests in our kids at a record level, $10,000 per pupil, and rolls out programs to help ensure that we're increasing student achievement. And so we've got incentives for districts to embrace best practices that are tested and trusted and working here in Michigan to improve student outcomes. And I will turn it over to Deputy Director Garant to add more.
I'll just add to that as part of that rollout, there is a requirement on districts to spend the money they're already receiving differently in more research-based ways that are strategies and opportunities that were created here in Michigan that have shown to be successful. And so not only are we investing more for those that need it, but also requiring districts to spend the money they're already receiving in a different way to drive better outcomes.
Representative Rogers.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. I think we sound like a broken record, but I can't help but highlighting it again with the federal freeze. It's no secret that Medicaid and DHHS is the biggest proportion of any Michigan budget. Have you started conversations about looking at rainy day fund as one? I know it's a little bit early, but that's one question I have. And then could you go into any more detail about the $96 million that you outlined ensuring healthcare access, if you can provide a little bit more detail? Thank you.
You got it. When it comes to changes at the federal level, of course, we're tracking very closely Medicaid. As you mentioned, it's one of the great resources that the federal government funds, and it means healthcare for 2.6 million Michiganders. I know I said this, the traditional Medicaid program, it's 1.4 million pregnant women and children who access healthcare via Medicaid. So we're tracking very closely what could happen in that space. And with federal funds making up 42% of our budget, there's just not going to be an opportunity for the state to backfill. Kyle mentioned we're in great shape. We've got a record balance in our rainy day fund, but painful cuts of that extent we would not be able to backfill. And that means higher health care costs for Michiganders. It means rural hospitals could struggle. And I'll just add, going back, when Governor Whitmer was in the state Senate, she partnered with then Governor Snyder to expand our Medicaid program. Republicans and Democrats came together and worked to do the right thing and make sure that more Michiganders had access to health care. And so I'm hopeful that if there are proposed changes here, that we'll have that same bipartisan effort to fight for our Michigan residents and keep health care access.
And then the second part of the question was that $96 million. Can you give a little bit more detail?
Yes, that is the number associated with increasing the Medicaid spend down threshold. So Deputy Director Garant mentioned that in order to access health care, seniors and people with disabilities are required to spend down their assets into poverty to access health care. So increasing that threshold from 38% of the federal poverty line up to 100% will mean more people have access to health care without going broke. It's an issue that the Commission on Aging has long advocated for. It helps keep seniors in their home and will make health care more accessible to residents across the state.
Representative Beeson.
Thank you, Chair, for letting me get a quick question in. Thanks for being here. I'm really concerned about the expansion or exploring the road funding, this pilot program, only due to the fact that we have raised bridges in our area right now, and we are actually charging more than the Mackinac Bridge, and it's dividing our entire county and Bay City. It was a bad decision by leasing, opening up the laws to allow a lift bridge in the state of Michigan, and I'm hoping that maybe these pilots are not about learning how we're going to continue to toll roads that are going to actually divide our city to the east and west right now. So I'm hoping that these pilot programs are not about toll roads.
I can't speak to the local issue in your community, and Senator Kleinfeld might be able to add more details on the proposal. But what we're looking at is with long-term trajectory of the types of vehicles that people drive and sustainable road funding, what that package could look like with support from the federal government.
Thank you.
If they're doing the pilot we've been talking about, it's road usage. It's not toll roads. It's capturing road usage, and there's a lot of different ways to do that. But I'm not positive that that's what they're doing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Representative Morgan.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Director and Deputy Director. My question is probably not a surprise to many folks. It's related to public transportation. Working families, young people, seniors rely on public transportation across our state to access jobs, education, medical appointments, see family, and more. Without sustained funding for our transit agencies, both urban and especially rural transit agencies are going to struggle to maintain their services, let alone expand them. This is a central feature to growing our population and our economy here in Michigan. I'm curious that I don't see a lot about public transportation in this presentation. I'm hopeful you can speak more to the executive plans around expanding access to public transportation.
This budget includes $767 million in state-restricted federal and local funds to support transit across the state. As you mentioned, increased investment in transit is going to be critical to growing our population and growing our economy, and that carries across urban, rural, and suburban communities. Like I mentioned, there were productive conversations on a long-term road funding plan late last year. We are looking forward to picking those back up, and I know that transit will be a key part of those conversations, so look forward to getting it done.
Representative Robinson.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you guys for coming. I know in Utica, we just had our 21st water main break in the last 2 years, and you don't have to drive far to find a community that these keep coming up. I know in Warren on primary election day, the whole city was flooded. So my question is everybody talks about roads and bridges, but is there any money for sewers and water mains repair that desperately needed in almost every community in the state?
Yes. As a Romeo Bulldog, I won't bring our competitiveness to the table here. But this budget includes $30 million additional in ongoing support for water infrastructure and $50 million one time. That's building on the historic investments we've made in water infrastructure across the state.
Representative Steckloff.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you both for being with us today. I did want to move to the other side of education real quick. Of course, we've beat a dead horse here, but if we were to see the Department of Education crumble, I am extremely nervous about how we have access to any type of funding for a student for education. Pell Grants, unsubsidized, subsidized loans, Parent Plus loans, Graduate Plus loans. So literally every type of financial aid from the federal government, including loans, would be shut down. We have this incredible flagship program here, the Michigan Achievement Scholarship, which offers, $5,500 for those attending a four-year university. My question is, just to kind of put it in perspective, the Michigan Achievement Scholarship is one of the first scholarships that also affects the middle class. How, between the Michigan Achievement Scholarship, number one, how many students were able to take advantage of it to show the complexity of how wonderful this program is? And number two, do we by any chance have any data back yet about the Community College for All in-district program?
We're going to monitor closely changes to federal student loans. It will have real impacts on affordability. moving in the opposite direction of the incredible progress that we've made here, as you mentioned. The Reconnect program was set up during the governor's first term in an all-Republican legislature, as well as the Achievement Scholarship. And I'm proud of the improvements and additional investments we've made over the past several years. This year, the Achievement Scholarship is supporting 56,000 students across our state. We're expecting up to 100,000 students when it's fully utilized. In terms of your second question, we may need to follow up.
Yeah, we do have some preliminary data results back and kind of contextually around the outcomes so far. Obviously, we're just got through the first semester for many of those students, but we'll follow up with additional information.
Representative Mueller.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm looking at the slide for the public safety here. It says that you're going to hire 120 new Michigan State police troopers. Is that accurate, considering we're going to have a lot of people retiring? So how many people are retiring this year versus how many are we going to hire? Because if you're going to make your streets safer, we need more police.
I don't have retirement data here with me today, but I'll say that we've been working aggressively to recruit more troopers into state service. So our budget includes resources to train and deploy an additional 120 state troopers. There were also contracts approved for the State Troopers Association going forward that includes more than a double-digit increase in wages to help support them and make sure that we fill the vacancies in the department. That's on top of the $1.6 billion we've invested in public safety since the governor took office. We've got the $75 million Public Safety Trust Fund reflected in this budget, as well as a 4% increase in revenue sharing to communities across the state to hire police and fire.
I have a question on the CTE and the apprenticeships. So will they be open or will they be restricted to certain providers? And if so, what restricted providers?
Are you referring to the CT expansion or the apprenticeship pieces?
The apprenticeships.
We would have to follow up on that one. I'm not sure off the top of my head, sorry.
Rep. Maddock.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've had about 15 people text me since I've been sitting here, so I have to ask the elephant in the room question. You're proposing Governor Whitmer's budget today. Where is Governor Whitmer and why isn't she here today?
I appreciate that question. She today is in Grand Rapids celebrating the Reconnect program with graduates.
Representative Cavett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you both for being here. You're obviously very talented at what you do, so we appreciate that. Not just in my community, but citizens around the state are very interested in government transparency. But the governor's last budget removed a lot of the reporting requirements that were in that budget, specifically Section 214, which required every department to maintain a public website that identified a scorecard that tracks and regularly updates the metrics that are used to monitor progress in that department and their performance. Section 222, which pertains to giving public and legislative notice to any department employee severance payment. Would you commit to reestablishing those reporting requirements?
We're committed to transparency, and we're here to partner with any and everyone here with any questions that you have about the budgets that you're overseeing. I can't speak to the boilerplate sections that you're referencing specifically, but I'll say this, our departments are here to work with you as we craft our budgets and look forward to continuing the conversation.
The public needs access to that information, so thank you very much.
Senator Camilleri.
Switching back to the landfill tipping fee discussion, as you are probably well aware, in my community in Van Buren Township, as well as in Romulus, and many other areas of my Southern Wayne County district, trash and landfill issues are of top concern for our residents. We receive so much trash that comes from Canada and other states. And then when you add on the radioactive waste that came from New York, as well as the waste that came in from Ohio and that train disaster being directed to Michigan, we've been leading the efforts in the legislature to push back on this. I know you've been leading the efforts on the tipping fee question. Can you talk a little bit more specifically about that fee increase and how that would help deter some of these bad actors from sending their waste to Michigan, excuse me?
Absolutely. So the proposal that we are announcing is not too different from what former Governor Snyder proposed while he was in office. Michigan's fees are far below those surrounding states and some of our other counterparts. So we're proposing to bring Michigan in line with surrounding states to discourage the out-of-state and out-of-country trash that comes in and fills up our communities. So we look forward to working with locals in the legislature on having that conversation. I do think it really shines a light on the economic opportunity at our border and our interaction with Canada and others. Obviously, with the auto industry and our agriculture sector, we do a lot of commerce there with our trading partners, and reducing the trash coming over to Michigan is one change that I would really like to see.
Representative Kelly?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I see that you have some additional funds to maintain state office buildings. Yet we all know that there's a paucity of state employees working in these buildings. Does the governor have any plans to do away with some of the more liberal remote work policies?
This budget reflects a continuation of the policy that the state has on remote work. And I will say every one of our departments has some in-person requirement. Just like the private sector, state government has modified how we do work, and we're focused on best serving the taxpayers and getting the most bang for the buck for Michiganders around their state. I'm happy to follow up on offline with some of the savings that we've realized by not having state workers in the office every day of the week. I can say in the state budget office, 2 of our agencies now share a floor and rotate which days they're in office, and that's delivering savings for taxpayers and getting more bang for the buck while best meeting the needs of our residents.
Senator Kleinfeld.
Thank you. There was a question about our reliance on the federal government's money. Are we a donor state, whereas overall the amount of money that flows from Michigan to the federal government is higher than the amount of money that flows back to us?
I'm happy to follow up with you on more information.
Okay, I believe that we are, and there are several states that it's the exact opposite. The amount of money that flows from the federal government to them is much higher than the amount of money that they send to the federal government. So thank you for fighting for every federal dollar. I appreciate it.
So I have an additional question. That is on the statewide court case management system. There is a request for some ongoing money, but we have $150 million sitting in it, and the system is not built out. Why is there a need for ongoing, and is there really a need for this system if we still haven't expended any money and made any real progress on it?
I'm sure that my colleagues with the courts would be happy to answer more detailed questions here, but the transition that we're making is to better serve residents across the state of Michigan, to improve collaboration between local and state government, and it's a massive overhaul. They're making great progress, and we want to make sure they have the resources that they need to continue doing that.
Senator Kavanaugh.
Thank you, Chair. Just wanted to highlight and ask about my district. District 6 stretches across from Farmington Hills, Livonia, all the way to Detroit and Redford. And so it's quite unique on some of the residents and what they like to uplift. But ever since COVID, and what we've been noticing is small businesses really being the ecosystem to our communities. And so I'd like to hear a little bit about how you're planning on, in this budget, uplifting small businesses and helping with that ecosystem so they know that we have their backs during tough times.
I appreciate that question. Like I mentioned, my parents own and run a heating and cooling company in Macomb County, and they work harder than anyone I know. And so when I see these investments here, I think of small business owners as regular, everyday people in our communities. And so a lot of the proposals that we've included to lower costs, we're thinking about small business owners through that lens. We're continuing the Going Pro Talent Fund grants, which is more than $50 million to employers to help upskill and make sure they have the talent that they need. The Business Attraction and Community Revitalization Program supports small businesses in downtowns as they grow and expand. And in addition, we have $10 million to support small businesses and entrepreneurs in main streets across the state.
Representative Farhat.
Thank you, Chair. In 2021, flooding devastated many homes in southeast Michigan. In the city of Dearborn and the parts of Detroit that I represent, families had to clear out their entire lives and put it on the curb to be picked up and thrown away. It was something that devastated them, and to this day, many families are still recovering. One thing that I would love to at least have you folks consider as we're looking at infrastructure proposals, or if you can mention in the budget, is what we're doing to tackle the chronic, I think it's chronic, southeast Michigan flooding. You know, this is a once every 100-year storm that's happening every 5 years. The math is not math in there. And so whatever we can do to address that, I'm curious if there's any solutions we're doing here in the budget, or if there are ways that we can work on a proposal as part of a larger infrastructure conversation to address this. And if there's any federal dollars that are available, maybe that we can draw down. Just wanted to make sure that I'm uplifting that, considering the impact it's had many of our districts here in southeast Michigan.
Absolutely. That flooding I know was devastating, and we secured investment under a previous legislature to upgrade water pumps on some of those highways and overpasses where there's continual flooding. So that infrastructure work is underway. We're always happy to partner on more. And that actually is a great highlight of our partnership with the federal government when it comes to emergency preparedness. Organizations like FEMA, MSP support when we're responding to a crisis, whether it was the flooding in Detroit or in Midland in May of 2021. The federal government provides critical support to help our communities in times of need. And so we'll continue to monitor changes there and what it could mean for residents.
Thank you.
Representative Roth.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you both for being here today. My first committee, yay. I'm hearing a lot of talk about chaos. The federal money's not coming back to us. Have you had any internal discussions about what would happen if we get all that money back in more a generic block grant type situation? How would you work with the legislature and the administration together to work that out if we do get it all back together?
I think we've got to be prepared for all scenarios, and that's the work that our departments have been undertaking. And then whatever changes do come our way, it's going to take all of us working together to figure out the best solutions for Michiganders. So we'll look forward to working with you on that.
Representative Price.
Thank you, Chair. And just a follow-up to that, we receive so many calls from our constituents when they lose access to the information about those federal resources coming in. Wondering if SBO has any contingency plans for these hiccups that might happen in terms of people losing access to the information both in and out of federal resources.
We're actively monitoring the changes right alongside you. We're always happy to share what we know, and we're working with our agents to interpret policies coming out of the administration and the courts to understand what it means for our state.
Senator Tice.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for your presentation today, and I just wanted to say I'm extraordinarily impressed with your knowledge and your ability to respond back and forth with everything. But I'm kind of a little bit stuck with Senator Bumstead's question. Given the level of knowledge that you have, it seems how much is left is pretty basic. So I wanted to ask that you interact with me afterwards and that we actually get an answer to that question, because where this implemented, how much is left seems like the most basic question here.
You've got it. This budget, after making the investments, paying tax cuts, paying down debt, leaves $11 million general fund and $18 million in the school aid fund on the balance sheet. I know in previous conversations, we've had different numbers and numbers that have been higher than this left on the balance sheet. And I'll say this reflects a return to normal. We had an incredible opportunity with a surge in one-time federal dollars during COVID and carried those funds so that we could partner with the legislature, Republicans at the time when the dollars first came in. And we wanted to make sure that we took a really strategic approach in investing those in one-time investments. We worked together on bipartisan investments across our state into water infrastructure, into improving our state parks, building a new state psychiatric hospital. And we're very deliberate about spending those one-time dollars on one-time investments, which took some time to spend that down. I'm really proud to share here, there was an obligation deadline at the end of the year that all those dollars needed to be obligated. We had a goal of keeping those taxpayer dollars here in our state. I'm proud to share that we obligated every single last dollar. And those were contracts signed to follow the appropriations approved by this legislature. So that's why it looks a little different. We're back to return to normal.
Representative Van Workum.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Going through this, it kind of does the highlights of the budget, but soon we'll get the full details of the governor's budget. In anticipation of that, how many new programs are going to be created and how many are new spending lines should we anticipate?
That's a great question. We've got binders for anyone who would like a hard copy. Everything is also available online. For this budget, we really focused on doubling down on the fundamentals. So how do we keep doing what we're doing to lower costs for families, grow jobs in the economy, support our seniors, and make sure that we're improving student outcomes? So the proposals that you'll see and reflected in the budget once you take a deeper dive continue to double down on those bipartisan priorities.
So will we see those as just expansions of current programs, or do we anticipate new programs that will be created?
This is largely doubling down on what we've been doing to make sure that we're best serving the residents of the state of Michigan.
So in the interest of time, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up this meeting. I will leave some time for Chair Boleyn to end us with some remarks, and then I will do so and adjourn. So I'll turn it back over to Chair Boleyn.
Thank you so much. Again, thank you very much for being here. Thank you to the committee from the Senate and the House for your engagement, your questions. I think what we see is there are a lot of loose ends and a lot of unanswered questions, and so I look forward to the process. I do think it will be a journey. I think we're ready. We're packed and ready for it. Appreciate the governor's partnership in more transparency, accountability, fiscal responsibility, and hopefully fiscal sustainability. We have made it very clear on our mission for Michigan in that we want in the House to make Michigan more affordable and give taxpayers good value for their dollar. We know that we've heard about the timeline, and I'm sure that we will meet the timeline, making sure that we are funding our critical services. But we have to have in mind that this is the taxpayers' money, and while we can leverage federal money, it may not always be a good investment of our efforts either. I hope that as we move forward, we can continue to make life more affordable in the state of Michigan, make sure our kids are educated, our streets are safe, our infrastructure, people can have drinking water. It's not just a matter of affordability. We have areas, workforce housing areas that really have water that is just not even drinkable. So again, I think we need to focus on investments in the actual infrastructure, and I look forward to the conversations ahead. Thank you again.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to echo the sentiments of thanking you both for coming and presenting the governor's budget proposal. This is the start. This is the start of our conversations. I've said this since our first budget that we were a part of, now this is year 3, that budgets are moral documents. We can talk the talk, we can have conversations in front of the media, but until we can say that we are standing up for the people of Michigan, our men, our women, our children, our veterans, our seniors, then we are misguided in saying that we care about the people of Michigan. And all roads lead through this year's budget process. So with the decrease of the one-time federal COVID dollars, this is going to be quite a feat for us to put aside our egos and political posturing to come together to present a budget that we all can be proud of. So I'm excited to working with each and every one of you, both in the House as well as our senators, to put forward a budget for the people. So with that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn, moved by Senator Camilleri, supported by Senator Santana. I would like to move that the Senate Committee on Appropriation stands adjourned.
There being no further business before this committee, the committee will stand adjourned.